Now that Chaz Lanier has gone and committed to Tennessee, I think it's a very good thing that we know the Wildcats are now all in on Jaxson Robinson.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on in to Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing where Kentucky basketball now turns now that Chaz Lanier has committed to the Tennessee Volunteers. It was reported earlier today. What do we think about Jaxson Robinson, Wooga Poplar, and Will Riley? Going to talk about that on today's episode. Some very good news, actually, regarding Poplar and Riley, but I think it's very good to know that, first and foremost, the Wildcats are all in on Jaxson Robinson. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show, and if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball officially now all in on BYU transfer Jaxson Robinson. In case you did not see earlier today, Chaz Lanier has committed to the Tennessee Volunteers over the Kentucky Wildcats and BYU Cougars. Huge hit for what could have been for Kentucky basketball's roster. I'm not going to sit here and minimize just how big of a get this would have been for Kentucky. Statistically, the most efficient shooter in the country. Pair him up with guys like Kirk Carissa and Kobe Brea in that backcourt, and it would be a very, very lethal trio, in my opinion, for opponents to stop. Unfortunately, that ended up not being the case. He commits to the Vols. The Vols should be very good next season with Lanier at the 2 or the 3, depending on where they want to play him. And now Kentucky is left to go find pieces elsewhere, and there have been some pieces in the background that they've been having conversations with for quite some time now that they are going to try and bring in. Most notably, Jaxson Robinson, the transfer from BYU. What have we said over the past week and a half? Kentucky basketball needs a pure scorer to add to this roster, a roster that does a multitude of things very, very well, but they don't necessarily have that leader in the points per game category just quite yet. And I think that Robinson would be able to provide that. Obviously, you and I have talked about his skill set multiple times here on the show. A 6'6", 6'7" wing that could play the 3 or the 4. I believe will probably play somewhere in between that for Kentucky basketball if he does end up coming here. Played underneath Mark Pope during his time with the Cougars, over 13 points per game, shot 35.8% from beyond the arc. He is a pure wing scorer. That was super, super fun to watch in BYU's offense a season ago. Came off the bench as the 6th man for the Cougs, and he ended up being their leading scorer on their roster just a season ago. He likes to take shots, he likes to make shots, and that's what Kentucky is looking to add to this roster, a confident scorer that does exclusively that, go out and score the basketball. Obviously, again, like I just mentioned, Kentucky's got shooters on this roster, Brea, Carissa, just to mention a couple, Perry, Noah, as your freshman coming in that can really shoot the lights out of the basketball, but you're looking for somebody that it doesn't really necessarily matter how good the efficiency is. Obviously, the efficiency needs to be decent, but it doesn't really matter what the efficiency looks like more than can you go out there and get a bucket at this point. And Kentucky could have had the best of both worlds with Lanier, but I think that now it's very clear the Wildcats, who have been continuing to build their relationship with Jaxson Robinson, are now going to be able to try and capitalize on that. Robinson, in case you don't know, is still currently in the NBA draft. If he stays in the NBA draft, I think Kentucky's got some issues, first and foremost, but I don't see that happening. We talked about this on yesterday's show. We talked a lot about Robinson on yesterday's show, in case you want to go check that out. Just as far as recent reports coming out of Salt Lake, coming out of a couple of different NBA camps, a Utah Jazz beat writer who is close to the situation recently went on an ESPN radio show in Utah, and this beat writer spoke about how she knew essentially that Robinson has not really been talking to anybody else outside of Pope during this draft process. He's not been talking to Kevin Young and BYU. He's not been talking to Kansas. He's not been talking to Tennessee. He's not been establishing a relationship with any of these other coaches or programs. And she said, if he comes back to college, it's not going to be an NIL thing. It's not going to be anything around that. It's going to be more focused around familiarity for him where he goes to play college ball. If Robinson does come back, Kentucky now has the resources to kind of throw the funds at Jaxson Robinson needed. They have allocated the funds instead of giving them to Lanier, who is committed to UT. They now have Robinson on board where you can give him a good NIL offer, pitch him about familiarity, put him in a system with a bunch of veterans, give him the chance to succeed and prove, boost his draft stock for next season where he is a certified second or even first round prospect depending on just how well he plays. And then you have certified money coming in for next season. It's pretty clear. There's no kind of beating around the bush. Kentucky is going to push all their chips in on the table, I think, on Robinson now. And now that we know that's the clear-cut number one overall choice, there are other players in the background here that Kentucky basketball is also going to pursue because Kentucky still has a couple of scholarships left. They don't just have one. And I think they're going to do everything they can to try and fill out these two spots with some pretty solid high-profile players. One of them potentially being a reclassification from a freshman, and one of them being a very, very physical guard out of Miami. Wooga Poplar, somebody that we've talked about a little bit on here on the show, has officially scheduled a visit to UK. Let's talk about what we know about Poplar, his recruitment, and his overall style of play in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, wherever you are tuned in, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, I've got a little bit of housekeeping here to talk about with you guys for just a second. A lot of you in the comments have been asking questions about the appearance of the show, about the pennants in the background here, about moving things around, about doing specific things with the set. And I want to tell you guys, we're not going to change anything now, but I just want to let you guys know we've got a big announcement coming in September of this year. Going to be some major changes to the show. I'm super, super, super excited about it, what we're building towards. I'd encourage you, now's a great time to subscribe if you haven't already. This show is going to look pretty different here, I think, in just a few months. I'm very, very thrilled about it. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Will not change anything just yet, but no, major changes are coming. Okay, so we've talked about Jaxson Robinson. Kentucky's all in on him. You could not be more all in on a prospect to add to your team right now. But your secondary options, players that you still very much so want on the roster, but I think if you're doling out NIL money, we're going to prefer one over the other. Wooga Poplar, a player out of Miami, has lined up a visit to Kentucky. According to Aaron Bracy, at Aaron_Bracy, Bracy on Twitter, who is a basketball beat reporter in Philadelphia, had this to say yesterday night about Poplar. Philly native Wooga Poplar remains a possibility for Villanova. Here's what I'm hearing. He has still planned visits to Arkansas, Kentucky, and Oregon, and possibly Kansas. He also hasn't ruled out the remaining in the NBA draft and has several workouts lined up. Back in April, Poplar's father said Kentucky was interested in his son and was planning to set up a visit, but there's not really been a whole lot of conversation since that point. And since that point, Poplar has completed a visit to Villanova in his hometown. Will Kyle Neptune and company be able to secure the services of Poplar over the likes of Arkansas, Kentucky, or Oregon? I'm not going to lie. I strongly doubt it with the direction of that program. It's very disappointing to see. I hope he's able to rebound there as long as it has nothing to do with Kentucky. You know what? We'll rock a little bit with Nova. I've got literally no ties there, but it's a shame to see a program like that kind of fall from grace so quickly after being such a revered program with Jay Wright being such a well-respected coach. They're not in a good spot right now, and frankly, I don't think they have the chops to win this recruiting battle. I will eat my words on this show if they end up winning it. Poplar at 6'5", nearly 200 pounds, very physical wing / 2 guard. Somebody that I think Kentucky could definitely use at the 2 or the 3 just because of his veteran presence, his defense, and just his overall, again, just physicality. He's a strong player. I think that he would be good to pair up with guys like Brea in the in a 1-2-3 lineup. If you had Carissa, Brea, and Poplar as your 1 through 3, that's a tough out, man. That's a very, very tough out because you have one of the best assist men in the country that's also in the 99th percentile of catch and shoot scores. You've got an extremely physical defender in Wooga Poplar, who has been playing college basketball for what is going on, I believe, 5 years now. And then you've got Kobe Brea, statistically the best shooter in the country, the most efficient scorer in terms of points per possession this past season. That's a tough out. Oh, by the way, they're all listed at 6'3" or taller. Carissa, 6'3", Poplar, 6'5", Brea, 6'6". That's a tough ask to guard that. 13.1 points per game, shot 43% from the field, 38.5% from 3, averaged almost 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, and 31.2 minutes per game. We've talked a lot on the show about Poplar and his individual game-by-game statistics, about how he was a big deal for the Hurricanes last season just in terms of success, because they would have games where Poplar shot very well, and they'd beat the dog out of some ACC opponent. And then they'd have games where Poplar, who consistently took double-digit shots, would not perform well. The team statistically would perform average or even above average surrounding him, and the offensive effort was either just not enough or just clearly not enough. It's very interesting, the role that Poplar played for Miami's success just a season ago. I think if you pair him with guys like Brea, with guys like Robinson, with two true centers that really do have the opportunity to score, I think at a pretty effective rate, I think that it becomes less of a factor just how important people like Poplar are to a roster in terms of scoring. But I don't necessarily think that means his abilities are then kind of redacted or reduced to less. I think that he would still be an effective player for the Kentucky Wildcats. I think he'd be somebody that you would want just simply because of his experience and, again, hate to beat this word to death, but physicality. The Wildcats need a player like this. They needed a player like Lanier. They needed somebody who's been out there, that knows what he's doing, that can go and get a bucket, except with the difference with Poplar, that he actually can play a little bit of defense, which, again, is not something that you necessarily needed from Chaz Laner. You don't desperately need defense, although I'll say whatever Lanier brought to the table was probably going to be better than whatever Kentucky's guards had last year. I'll just say that. But Poplar, better in that category. Not as good of a scorer. There's a give and take here, I believe. There's a dead period until June 2nd right now for college basketball. So Poplar's going to have to wait a little bit, today being May 24th. Poplar's going to have to wait a little bit to get in here, to get a visit in to any of these schools, the Razorbacks, the Ducks, or the Wildcats. But I think Kentucky would take him and make him into a more efficient and better player than what he currently is. Frankly, his results at the NBA Combine, I talked about this with Lanier. Lanier's play was not a true reflective of his potential, I don't believe. Poplar, I think it was a reflective of what he can be in spurts. And it's just a matter of whether or not you get those spurts, those scoring spurts, more consistently. Poplar, I think, is essentially, and I wouldn't say a second option, but if we're tiering this, Robinson's in tier 1, and Poplar is in tier 2. Poplar in tier 2, alongside a 5-star that could potentially reclassify. Let's talk here about Will Riley, a player I talked about the other day on the show. Just one of the more fascinating prospects, unique prospects in the country. Before I dive into that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time is the place to go get your NBA tickets. You can take the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets with Game Time. It has been a phenomenal NBA playoffs so far. Multiple Game 7s, lots of drama. Kentucky Wildcats across the board finding success in the NBA. It's a shame that Shea got bumped out by the Mavs, but PJ Washington is carrying the Dallas Mavericks into the Western Conference Finals. Wouldn't necessarily say carrying, but in terms of Kentucky repping UK. He is definitely out there making his name known as far as being a three-point shooter and a clutch foul line shooter. I should mention that as well. Love seeing PJ do well. If you want to go see a player like PJ or any NBA game for that matter in person, Game Time is the place to go check out. They've got views from all seats in the venue, and I think that this is a phenomenal resource because I've used Game Time quite a bit, both for MLB and college football tickets as well, and it has been perfect. The views from the seats have been better in person than they were on the pictures, and it was phenomenal, the pictures that I was selecting from to kind of see where I was sitting. It was incredible what Game Time provides you. It's very, very quick, super easy to use. You can get in, get out, get your tickets. You can get them right up to the start of the event. And again, they've got the Game Time guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It is the place to go to get your tickets. You can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, wrapping up the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, I really appreciate you guys checking out the show. Let's talk here for a little bit about Will Riley, a 5-star prospect in the 2025 class that could very well reclassify to 2024. As of right now, Riley is the number 16 overall player in the 24/7 Sports Composite. Number 3 small forward, number 2 player in the state of Pennsylvania. He is rated as a 4-star in 24/7 Sports, their raw player rating. On ESPN, he is a 4-star. On Rivals, he is a 4-star. So why am I saying Will Riley's a 5-star? Well, On3 has him rated significantly higher than those other 3 outlets, rating him as a 5-star and a top 10 player nationally. And I had to go watch. I had to go do a little bit of digging the other day to kind of see what Will Riley was about. We talked about it on yesterday's show at length. And I'll reiterate it to you here again. Will Riley, at 6'8", is one of the most fascinating scorers I've ever seen. His bag is diverse. It is unique, it is quirky, and it's unconventional. The way he likes to score the rock. I'll establish this point first. I didn't do this on yesterday's show. The kid will knock down the outside shot. He takes a little under 5 threes a game, Takes 4.7. But he operates, for the most part, majority in the mid-range. And he is super, super, super efficient at it. On3 decided to write an article breaking down exactly why they have Riley as a 5-star. And I think that what Jamie Shaw had to say about Riley and the way that he scores the ball is perfect. I said this on yesterday's show. I'll reiterate the quote here for today. This is what Shaw had to say about Riley. However, to say that Riley has a quirky way of scoring would be an understatement. Riley's feel in the mid-range is unlike many of his high school peers. He attacks the defense, gets 2 feet in the paint, and then has an array of step-throughs, up and unders, reverse pivots, and fadeaways to create an angle to get an open shot. And I will add on to that here. It is not necessarily the most fluid movement in terms of, ball handling. It's a little herky-jerky at times. But in terms of consistency with the way that he is kind of bouncing around all over the place in the mid-range, he gets to his spot, man. He gets to it quickly, he gets to it calmly, and he executes at an insanely high level, again, in that mid-range. And I've said it. I said it on yesterday's show. I'll reiterate it to you here quickly. I know a lot of people that watch this show think that I hate the mid-range period. I don't hate the mid-range period. I think that it can be a part of your offense if you have the personnel to make the shot consistently and efficiently. If you don't, I feel like you should be looking for more efficient shots because at the end of the day, you're trying to score points to win a game. More points means you win the game at the end of the game. I'm not trying to be smart. Like it's literally like that's kind of how people like Alabama have broken it down. It's like, 3's more than 2. We make more 3s. It's more complicated than that, obviously, but it's like, well, if we have players that can take 3s and make 3s at a higher level than they can 2 in different spots, and we take a ton of 3s, it's going to outweigh significantly the amount of points we could get if we were taking the same shots on the inside. The fan base watches ball. The people that watch me know ball. Riley, though, is players like him come along, and they're an exception, right? You've got guys like Keon Brooks for Kentucky in the past who would have games where they just went off in the mid-range, like that was their shot. Guys like Riley, you let him cook. You let him have that shot. If you have the one dude on your roster that can go out there and get you a mid-range floater, can get you a mid-range jumper, can get you a fadeaway, can get you a step through, just to get really, really weird movement, but it works. It works so well, and he knocks it down, man. Shaw had some fascinating statistics according to Synergy that I would love to share with you quickly before we get into kind of what's happening with his visit. Of Riley's 371 shot attempts at his high school season, in 18 games, 77% of them have been from 2-point range. 77% of his almost 400 shots from inside the arc, right? Synergy says that 58.5% of Riley's shots come off jump shots or runners. Almost 80% of those shots are off the bounce. So, of these 371 shot attempts, most of them are from inside the arc. Over half of them are jump shots or runners. And almost all of those shots are off the bounce. He is creating in a very unique way. And the efficiency is outstanding. Riley is shooting 46.4% from 3 right now. And he's shooting, I believe, a little under 50% from inside the arc. So the efficiency there is incredible if you're taking that many jump shots and that many runners. Here's the fun part about his three-point shooting, though, that I want to get to. Now that we've talked about the inside game, he's efficient there. Riley shooting 46.4% from 3 on 4.7 attempts per game. That's phenomenal, flat out. Here's the fun part. He's shooting 41.7% in catch-and-shoot threes and 48.9% in off-the-dribble threes this season. So I love talking about this. I've loved talking about Will Riley and his game because it is unlike anything that I've seen. Most of the time, when you watch basketball, when you play basketball, it's very clear to tell when your feet are set, when you have time, when you are thrown the ball instead of having to create off the dribble yourself. Statistically, you are a much better shooter than you are off the dribble, off balance, off time. And I think that is especially true when talking about the prospects that we've covered on this show. All of the transfer portal players, I don't want to say all, nearly every single one, it's a very large amount of the players that have either committed to Kentucky or we've discussed as potential prospects have been excellent, like top of the line, elite catch and shoot guys, right? Almost none of them are even good at scoring off the dribble. Most of them are terrible off the dribble in terms of effective field goal percentage. It is a weakness of their offensive game. Riley shoots, 8% better off the dribble than he does in catch and shoot situations. I don't know if I'm ever going to see that again, flat out. For that to be such a large discrepancy while also shooting at such a high level for both. He's still shooting almost 42% from three at 6'8". And by the way, he's shooting nearly 50 if you make him play off the dribble. That is crazy. That is crazy. And Shaw, I think, puts it perfectly. The scoring is the exciting part of Riley's game. Not only is he methodical and precise with how he goes about it, but he also consistently goes out and puts up numbers. The counting statistics support the eye test in that Will Riley can get buckets. However, the advanced analytics enhance the counting stats to show that Riley's bag is deep. Could not agree more. There is so much here to talk about with this player and how he could develop. And ladies and gentlemen, we've got great news. According to Tipton Edits and On3, Will Riley will take a 2-day visit to Kentucky very soon. He's going to be here starting June 4th. He's going to be here 4th and the 5th. Currently, right now, top 5 in Nike EYBL in scoring, averaging 1.4 points per game. He also, just this past weekend, dropped a 42-point game while shooting 15 of 16 from the floor, 5 of 5 from 3. His final 5 schools, well, it's 4 schools and a fifth team: Kentucky, Arizona, Arkansas, Alabama, and the NBL. Of course, Alabama wants this kid. Of course they do, because they could use Kentucky and Alabama are not extremely similar offensively, but they have similar concepts. And players like Riley at 6'8", 180, at that small forward, borderline guard spot, could do wonders. This is a very unique prospect. This is a special prospect. Kentucky's going to get him on campus. I want to see this through. He'd be good. I've never seen a prospect where just straight out of the gate watching his film, I've been like, yeah, no. Like that's a really, 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 really good prospect. Not in terms of polish, but in terms of potential. You see it. You absolutely do see it. He recently talked about Kentucky. I'll wrap up the show saying this. Kentucky has been saying that they like my game. They like how I'm developing, playing with pace, playing positionless. It's good the way they're recruiting me. They're recruiting me not too much, but they're reaching out enough. And Riley was asked thereafter after about potentially reclassifying to 2024, and he said it's on the table, but I've just been keeping it on the down low so far, just seeing my options, trying to see what's best for me. So no clear answer there as to whether or not Riley will reclassify, but it is on the table. It is on the table. Kentucky getting him here in just a couple of weeks. Super excited about it. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.